Hi everyone, I'm John Mercurio. Well, the trial of Scooter Libby may be nearing its dismal end, but we are just getting started with you.
That's right. The defense wrapped up abruptly earlier this week, announcing that they weren't going to do anything. There was probably a collective sigh of relief in Washington, or at least the White House. And do you think we wanted this like Nancy Grace wants a missing child? I love Nora.
Nancy Grace, friend of the show. Let's be honest. Nancy Grace is a big friend
I'll
of the
say
show.
this. I'll say this. I am, I wish Cheney was testifying just because
I
wanted to see Cheney testify.
Everybody wanted to see Cheney.
But
everybody wanted Rove to
let's
testify.
be realistic. The White House done had no part of this.
Right.
I mean, Libby is now taking one for the team. They went ahead and went with the, you know what, our defense is we're not going to have a defense because they want to say, see, the prosecution's case is so bad, we don't need to have a defense, which is really not their defense.
You know, I've been covering this story for a while, or watching the story's
been
coverage.
Covering this
I've been watching the story's coverage for a while,
you and
and
David
I will
Schuster.
say this, me and David Schuster,
Friend
me
of the show.
and Neil Lewis at the Times, and there was no bigger day of coverage than the day that there were 6 journalists on the stand at the White House, in courtroom number 16. And guess why that was? Reporters like nothing better than reporters making news. When they're part of the story, when they're part of the process, that piques their interest, I think, more than anything else.
It's true, and it's actually kind of sad because one thing about this trial I feel like we've learned, and it was one of those things, I talked to some White House reporters who were there in the White House in 02 and 03, and I said, don't you wish now you could take these transcripts from the courts and rewrite your stories back then? Because clearly this wasn't a disciplined White House. Clearly they were at war with each other. There's an interesting story going on here. The relationship between Ari and Rove and Libby, and there was a Cheney thing and there's a Rove thing. And that's an interesting story. This is how our presidents worked and all this stuff. And instead, we're trying to figure out who hates who at the New York Times or at
NBC.
Well, I see. I'm not going to say that. You say that. These are my new colleagues. But
Nobody hates you at NBC.
Nobody hates anybody at NBC. Those are professionals.
It's a nice broadcasting company.
That's right.
But look, what's interesting, there are a lot of journalists who come out of this looking a little bit scarred. Nobody probably more so than Judy Miller, but a lot of other reporters but you know who comes out of this thing looking really good? Walter Pincus of the Washington Post. People call him Walter A14 Pincus because most of his stories don't make the front page. They're dry. He, if you go back and actually look at the coverage like you're talking about, he is the one who was questioning the leak of the Plame of Valerie Plame's name. He's the one who was questioning the WMD claims, the uranium claims by the Bush administration, before anybody else was, and sort of out there alone and sort of an unsung hero.
Well, there you go.
Walter Pincus, we love you.
Now you're a friend of the show.